The morning sun spilled through the high glass panels of Langford and Pierce Communications, catching in the chrome edges of desks and the steam rising from paper cups. It was a place that smelled of ambition and caffeine, where words were currency, and silence was often mistaken for weakness. She sat at her desk, hands poised over the keyboard, her posture precise, her every movement careful, the kind of careful that comes from knowing eyes are always watching. Her nameplate read Amara Desai, Marketing Analyst. Her accent, however, spoke of another world, warm, lilting, wrapped in the gentle cadence of South Asia. "Morning. Amara," someone called, voice laced with polite mockery. "Did you enjoy your coffee today?" Laughter rippled across the open space. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, the kind that cuts under the skin. She smiled faintly, replying, "Yes, thank you." It was lovely. Her tone was calm, soft, disarming. But inside, the echo of their laughter tightened in her chest like a thread pulling taut. At 10 a.m., the team gathered for the weekly presentation rehearsal. Glass walls enclosed the conference room, but nothing about it felt private. The city skyline framed the meeting like a silent witness. Ethan, tall, clean-cut, the kind of man who thought his jokes were charm, stood at the head of the table. He was everything the company celebrated, confident, talkative, American-born, and he was her superior. "Okay, team," Ethan said, tapping his laptop. "Amara will walk us through the pitch for the new campaign." She nodded, stood, and moved toward the screen. Her slides came alive with color, clear, thoughtful, perfectly aligned. Her voice followed, deliberate, accented, beautiful. But halfway through her pitch, Ethan smirked. Hold on, he interrupted, imitating her softly. "Our global brand identity, is that how you say it, Amara?" The room chuckled. Someone covered their mouth to hide a grin. Another exchanged glances like school children in class. She paused, the clicker still in her hand. For a moment, the hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. Her heart wanted to defend itself, to explain that her English wasn't broken, it was seasoned. But her pride wouldn't let her plead. Instead, she smiled. "Yes," she said quietly. "That's exactly how I say it." And she turned back to the screen, continuing as if his words had been nothing but dust. That calm, that refusal to react, unsettled him more than anger ever could. As she finished, the polite applause that followed sounded hollow, forced. Ethan gave her a pat on the shoulder that lingered just long enough to sting. "Good effort," he said. "Maybe next time try to sound a little more, natural." The words lodged in her memory like splinters. Natural. As if the soil she came from was somehow artificial. When the meeting ended, she sat back at her desk, surrounded by whispers that pretended to be harmless. She could feel the laughter even when no one spoke, in the way chairs creaked, in how footsteps slowed near her cubicle. Her computer screen blurred behind her unshed tears. But she blinked them away. Not here. Not for them. She opened a new tab and began searching. Public speaking for non-native English professionals. One click, then another. A quiet rebellion, disguised as curiosity. Outside, the city buzzed. Cabs honked. Phones rang. Somewhere, a barista called out names that no one mispronounced. Amara leaned back and exhaled slowly. She would not change her voice. She would refine it, sharpen it, until every word carried the weight of everything she'd endured. The reflection in her screen caught her own faint smile, the kind that hides. "Storms, if you were her," the narrator asked softly, "would you laugh along or walk out?" Her answer, though silent, was already forming. Not yet, but soon. Night had fallen, but the city below refused to rest. From her small apartment on the 12th floor, Amara could see Manhattan pulsing like a restless heart. Headlights streaking across avenues, voices floating up from street corners, fragments of laughter mixing with the siren's cry. Inside, her apartment was a contrast to the world outside, dim, quiet, and painfully still. The only light came from the soft orange glow of a desk lamp and the blue reflection of her phone screen. She sat on the edge of her bed, shoulders hunched, still in her work blouse. The presentation replayed on her phone, not because she wanted to see it, but because she couldn't stop herself. Someone had filmed it, posted it in the team chat with laughing emojis. Ethan's voice echoed, followed by that roomful of laughter. Her own voice trembled in the playback, not because she'd been unsure of her words, but because she had felt the room turning against her. She watched it once, then again and again. Each replay cut deeper. At the fifth playback, the tears finally came. Not loud, not messy, quiet tears, sliding down her cheeks as if embarrassed to exist. She covered her mouth, afraid even her sobs might sound wrong, foreign, noticeable. After a while, she stood and crossed to the small bathroom mirror. The light flickered slightly as she faced herself. Eyes red. Lips trembling, she whispered the words again. Global brand identity. Her reflection blinked back. She repeated it, slower this time, deliberate, measured. Global brand identity. The vowels rolled differently now. Still hers, still marked by her homeland, but stronger. Not broken, rooted. She practiced again, then again. Adjusted her breath. Smiled at herself mid-sentence. She wasn't chasing their approval anymore. She was training her power. Every night became a rehearsal for something she couldn't yet name. She would speak to the walls, the mirror, the silence. At first it felt foolish, then freeing. Her reflection no longer looked like an outsider trying to fit in. It looked like a woman learning to command the room. By midnight, she had brewed tea, cleared her desk, and stuck a note above her lamp. They hear an accent. I hear history. She stared at it, her lips curving faintly. There was no anger now, just a new kind of energy, humming in her veins. She opened her laptop and searched for public speaking. Courses, online. The first result was a weekend. Workshop led by a retired diplomat. Speaking across cultures. The registration fee made her wince. She checked her balance, barely enough to cover it after rent. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she whispered, "It's an investment." Click. Confirmed. Outside, thunder rolled distantly over the skyline. The sound reminded her of her hometown monsoons. Rain hitting tin roofs, mothers calling children in from the streets, the smell of wet soil. She smiled. That was her sound. Her rhythm, her voice. As she turned back to the mirror, she began speaking softly to herself. You are not small. You are not foreign. You are not their joke. The city's lights flickered against her face. Gold, blue, white, like applause waiting in the dark. Hours later, she finally closed her laptop and crawled into bed. The laughter from the video still echoed faintly in her mind, but it no longer pierced. It sounded far away, like an old recording from another life. She turned off the light. The darkness felt gentle, almost protective. In that quiet, her thoughts whispered. They laughed because they heard something unfamiliar. One day, they'll listen because they hear something unforgettable. The hum of the refrigerator and the heartbeat of the city merged into one steady rhythm. She closed her eyes, clutching her pillow, not in pain, but in promise. Every accent, she murmured into the dark, is a story the world hasn't learned to listen to yet. And with that, Amara drifted to sleep, her heart steady, her voice quietly reborn. The air inside the Maple Street Community Center smelled faintly of old paint and strong coffee. Rows of mismatched folding chairs filled the small auditorium. A flickering fluorescent bulb buzzed above, stubbornly refusing to die, much like the hopes of the people seated below it. It wasn't a glamorous place. The stage was barely 2 feet high, the microphone a little crooked, the banner behind it handmade with colorful paper letters. Voices of Belonging, Immigrant Stories Night. Amara almost turned around at the door. She wasn't supposed to be here. A friend from her language class had volunteered her name for a short talk about adapting to life in America. She'd said yes out of politeness, never intending to follow through. Yet somehow, here she was, clutching her notes, heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. She sat in the second row, watching the first two speakers, a baker from Haiti, a teacher from Poland. Their words were simple but full of feeling. The audience clapped warmly after each one. No judgment, no snickering. Only empathy. Still, her palms were slick when the moderator called her name. Please welcome Amara Desai, marketing professional, community volunteer, and storyteller. Her knees trembled as she walked to the podium. She could hear the old speaker's hum as she adjusted the microphone. For a moment, the room blurred, just like that conference room had when Ethan had mocked her. She gripped the podium tighter. Then she inhaled. Her first words came out shaky. Good evening. Everyone, she paused. A few faces smiled back at her, encouraging, patient. She tried again. When I first came here, I thought the hardest part would be learning how to fit in, but it turns out the hardest part was learning how to keep myself. Her voice softened, but the tremor was gone. The audience leaned in. She spoke about the day she was laughed at in the office, though she never mentioned names. She described how the sound of laughter can echo long after it fades, and how sometimes the only way to quiet it is to speak louder than your fear. You see, she said, smiling now, our accents are not mistakes to fix. They are maps. They tell people where we've been and how far we've come. A few people nodded. Someone in the front row wiped a tear. Her voice flowed now, rhythmic, alive. For the first time, she wasn't trying to sound perfect. She was trying to sound true. When she finished, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Heavy with understanding. Then, applause. Soft at first, then rising until it filled the small hall completely. Amara blinked back tears as she stepped down from the stage. She wasn't shaking anymore. Her hands were steady, her smile unguarded. As she made her way through the small crowd, an elderly woman approached her. Silver hair, kind eyes, hands trembling slightly as she reached out. She took Amara's hand and said, her voice quivering, "Your accent, it sounds like home." For a second, Amara couldn't breathe. That single line, so gentle, so unexpected, cracked something open inside her that had been sealed by years of restraint. She hugged the woman, holding her longer than politeness required. The lights flickered again, but this time Amara didn't mind. They made the moment feel almost cinematic, imperfect, yet beautiful. As the event wrapped up, she stood by the exit watching families laugh, hug, and share stories in a dozen different languages. For once, the mix of sounds didn't feel chaotic. It felt like harmony. Outside, the winter air bit at her cheeks. She pulled her coat tighter, her steps lighter than they'd been in months. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The same voice they once mocked had found its first audience. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not yet. It was about recognition. And as she walked toward the subway, her breath fogging in the cold air, she whispered to herself with a small, sure smile, "Let them laugh. I'm learning to echo louder." The hotel ballroom in Boston glittered with quiet wealth, chandeliers casting soft halos of light, name tags catching the gleam of camera flashes. The backdrop was a massive LED screen, its blue and gold design announcing the new voice of global leadership, Annual Business Innovation Summit. Amara stood backstage, clutching her note cards, though she no longer needed them. Her reflection stared back from the sleek metal of a lighting panel, hair swept up, eyes calm, wrapped in confidence rather than nerves. The navy suit she wore was simple, sharp, elegant. A far cry from the timid woman who once stood in an office meeting, too afraid to defend her voice. Her friend and event coordinator whispered, "They're excited to hear you. Your video has been everywhere this week. 2 million views and counting." Amara smiled faintly. That community center video, grainy, shot on a borrowed camera, had spread across professional circles and immigrant forums like wildfire. People said her voice carried something rare, dignity wrapped in defiance. Out in the audience, business leaders, CEOs, and journalists shuffled papers and adjusted their mics. Among them, sitting somewhere behind a screen in a New York apartment, was Ethan. He had stumbled upon the video on LinkedIn. At first, he didn't believe it was her, Amara Desai, his former analyst, the quiet one he used to mock. But the moment she spoke, he recognized that rhythm instantly. The same accent he'd once ridiculed now commanding a stage larger than he'd ever stood on. He stared at the video, transfixed, humiliated. The irony was cruel and poetic. Her voice, the one he told her to change, had become her crown. Back in Boston, the lights dimmed. A soft melody played as Amara walked onto the stage. The applause rose, not out of courtesy, but genuine anticipation. Cameras turned toward her, flashes painting the air white. She stood before them, microphone in hand, and smiled. Her opening line came out steady, resonant, and beautifully hers. When I first entered the corporate world, I was told that to be heard I had to sound like everyone else. But the truth is, our power doesn't lie in blending in. It lies in standing out. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that means people are listening. She spoke about communication beyond accent, about how true leadership comes from authenticity. She shared how companies lose brilliance when they mistake difference for weakness. Her tone flowed like silk, confident, warm, unhurried. At one point, she paused deliberately. They said my voice was too soft, too foreign, too hard to understand. But the thing about underestimation is, it teaches you to let your results do the talking. A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall. Heads nodded, phones lifted to record, then came her final note, not rehearsed, not written, just felt. If you've ever been laughed at for the way you speak, remember this. Sometimes silence is louder than revenge. Do you agree? The crowd erupted. The applause thundered through the hall, long, powerful, alive. People stood. A standing ovation. Flashes flickered like stars. For a second, Amara closed her eyes. The noise washed over her, not as validation, but as release. Every echo of laughter from that old office, every whispered insult, every smirk, drowned beneath a wave of applause. Back in his apartment, Ethan turned off the video and sat in the dark. He could still hear her voice through the silence, calm, unbothered, victorious. He thought about that day in the boardroom, about how easily he'd dismissed her, how quickly he'd laughed. The memory stung more than any reprimand, because this success, was his undoing, wrapped in her grace. On stage, Amara took a slow breath, letting the applause fade naturally. Then she smiled and said softly into the microphone, "I used to fear my accent. Now it's how the world remembers my name." The crowd rose again. The cameras zoomed in, capturing not just her face, but her peace. When she stepped off stage, her hands weren't trembling. Her heart wasn't racing. It was steady, the rhythm of a woman who no longer needed to prove anything. In the hallway, a young volunteer approached her shyly. "Ms. Desai," she said, "my English isn't perfect either, but after hearing you, I think maybe it doesn't have to be." Amara smiled, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Don't perfect your English," she said. "Perfect your confidence." Outside, Boston's evening lights shimmered against the Charles River. The city hummed with motion. Taxis, laughter, opportunity. She looked out at it all and whispered to herself, almost like a vow, "This is only the beginning." The boardroom that once echoed with Ethan's voice now felt hollow. The mahogany table gleamed under sterile fluorescent lights. But the air was heavy, not with authority, but with quiet unease. The HR director sat across from him, expression neutral, legal counsel beside her. A thin file rested between them, stamped with his name. Ethan adjusted his tie, forcing a confident smile that no longer reached his eyes. "Mr. Cole," the HR director began, her tone measured. "These are multiple reports concerning inappropriate comments and unprofessional conduct within your team. Some of these incidents go back over 2 years. He laughed, too loudly, too nervously. "You can't be serious. I've led this department for a decade. This is how we talk in sales. Everyone jokes, everyone—" "Not everyone," she interrupted softly, sliding the file toward him. Not anymore. For the first time, he noticed how the room had changed. The younger staff who once hung on his every word no longer made eye contact. The energy that once fueled his swagger was gone, replaced by the hum of caution and compliance. Ethan opened the file. Words blurred together: microaggression, verbal intimidation, discriminatory tone. He recognized fragments of old conversations, things he'd said casually, laughing, certain they'd be forgotten. They weren't. Pending investigation, we're recommending temporary suspension, the HR director continued. You'll hand over all company devices by end of day. He blinked, his world tilting slightly. You can't do that. I built this place. No, she said calmly. You worked here. There's a difference. The words landed like a verdict. That evening, he sat alone in his office, blinds half closed, desk half empty. He stared at the skyline that once looked like ambition and now looked like distance. His reflection in the window seemed older, smaller, stripped of certainty. He reached for his phone, thumb scrolling through LinkedIn, muscle memory searching for distraction. Then he froze. There it was. A headline glowing on his feed, tagged by hundreds of users. Amara Desai to deliver keynote at Global Leadership Summit. The power of authentic voices in modern business. Her photo filled the screen. Radiant, confident, poised in that same navy suit that had become iconic. The caption below read, "Her message is transforming corporate culture across borders." Ethan's throat went dry. His mind replayed their last conversation. The laughter, the dismissal, the cruel mimicry of her accent. The sound haunted him now, echoing in reverse. He scrolled through the comments. Her talk changed the way I lead my team. Finally, a voice that speaks truth about inclusion. Powerful. She's redefining leadership. Powerful. Redefining. Words that had never once been used for him. He clicked on her keynote clip. Just a short snippet, but enough. There she was, standing before a packed auditorium, speaking with grace and certainty. Her voice carried the same melody he once mocked, only now it commanded the world's attention. Sometimes silence, she said, is louder than revenge. The audience applauded. The sound filled his office through tinny laptop speakers, each clap another echo of his own undoing. Ethan leaned back, running a hand over his face. The irony bit deep. Her rise was now the mirror of his fall. The industry that once applauded his arrogance now admired her empathy. He tried to tell himself it wasn't personal, that times had changed, that maybe this was just bad luck, but deep down, he knew the truth. She had changed the times. Her influence had quietly reshaped the very system that once protected him. A notification popped up. Internal memo. Mandatory diversity and inclusion training. Attendance required. He almost laughed at the bitter poetry of it. Outside the glass walls, colleagues whispered in passing. No one looked his way. The power that once followed him now avoided him, afraid to be associated. He turned back to the screen one last time. Her smile stared back, serene, unbothered, victorious. For years his laughter had filled rooms. Now it was her silence that filled the world. Ethan closed the laptop slowly, almost reverently, as if shutting a book whose ending he didn't want to read. In the distance, thunder rolled, faint, almost symbolic. His world hadn't just cracked. It had gone quiet. The hall shimmered like a cathedral of ambition. Flags from every nation hung behind the podium, colors rippling under soft lights. The emblem of the Global Leadership Summit, Geneva, glowed across massive LED screens. Cameras lined the aisles. Translators whispered into earpieces in 10 languages. Rows of diplomats, CEOs, activists, and journalists filled the seats, a mosaic of the world's most powerful minds, waiting for the next speaker. And then, she appeared. Amara stepped into the light, calm, yet commanding. The tailored white suit she wore contrasted beautifully with the blue backdrop, purity meeting purpose. The crowd hushed almost instinctively, as though the air itself had leaned closer. For a second, she paused at the edge of the stage. The lights blinded her briefly, but she smiled anyway. This was the same kind of brightness that had once made her nervous, back in that glass-walled office, when she stumbled over English idioms and heard laughter ripple behind her. But this time the brightness didn't intimidate her. It illuminated her. She reached the podium and adjusted the microphone. The glass of water beside her trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the thundering anticipation in the room. She looked up. Her voice, steady and warm, filled the silence. "When I first came here," she began, her accent wrapping around the words like a melody. "They told me to fix my accent." A few polite chuckles from the audience. Recognition, curiosity. She smiled faintly, her eyes glinting. "I didn't. I fixed my confidence instead." A ripple of applause spread through the hall, growing louder with each passing second. Heads nodded. Smiles appeared. For some, it was admiration. For others, revelation. She continued, walking away from the podium now, her movements fluid, her presence magnetic. "There was a time I believed that to be heard, I had to sound like everyone else. That my words mattered less because they carried the rhythm of another land. But language," she paused, raising her hand gently, "is not a wall. It is a bridge, silence. 1,000 people leaning forward at once. Every accent tells a story. Mine tells of a family who taught me resilience, of a mother who spoke softly, but never once apologized for her voice, of a girl who crossed oceans with nothing but a suitcase, a dream, and a dictionary." Her laughter, light, self-aware, softened the edges of the moment. "I used to think success meant erasing who I was. Now, I know success means being so authentic that the world adjusts to you." The screen behind her shifted, displaying an image, a collage of faces from different nations, all smiling, all speaking. Beneath them, her quote appeared in bold letters. "Our differences don't divide us. Our silence does." The applause came again, this time, standing. But she wasn't finished. She waited, letting the sound crest and fade like a wave. "Years ago," she said softly, "in an office not far from here, I was laughed at for the way I said a word. One word, it stayed with me. But what stayed longer was a question. Why do we give others the power to define our worth by their comfort?" A diplomat from Spain wiped a tear. A young interpreter from Kenya smiled through her headset. "Today, I stand before you not as a victim of mockery," she continued, "but as proof that no voice is too small when it carries truth. The world doesn't need you to sound perfect. It needs you to sound real." The crowd was on its feet again, applause thunderous, camera flashes strobing across her face. But in the noise, she stood still, calm, centered, almost serene. In the front row, she noticed a familiar face among the guests. The CEO of her former company, attending as part of the delegation. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. He smiled, respectful, almost humbled. No trace of the old hierarchy remained. And in that moment, Amara understood something deeper. Revenge hadn't brought her here. Growth had. Her success wasn't built on proving them wrong. It was built on finally believing she was right. As she closed her speech, her voice softened, but the quiet carried more weight than any roar. Every voice you hear today has crossed a border, some physical, some invisible. But each voice matters. Don't let the world shrink you to fit its comfort. Expand it to fit your truth. The hall erupted. Applause shook the floor. Delegates rose. Cameras captured the moment from every angle. Her face, calm and radiant, framed by the flags of the world. In that standing ovation, years of humiliation dissolved into purpose. Every laugh, every whisper, every doubt had led her here, to the place where her voice no longer asked for permission to be heard. She stepped back, bowed her head slightly and whispered under her breath, a line meant only for herself. They laughed at the sound, but they never understood the strength behind it. And as the spotlight dimmed and the applause echoed through Geneva, the world finally listened, not to her accent, but to her power. The marble floors of the Grand Elysée Hotel shimmered beneath chandeliers shaped like frozen stars. The evening after the summit had the air of quiet celebration. diplomats laughing softly in corners, reporters clutching their notepads like trophies, and young students chasing the signatures of those they admired. Amara stood at the center of it all, calm, radiant, composed. A glass of sparkling water in one hand, a pen in the other, cameras still lingered from the press conference, catching glimpses of her laughter, her poise, her presence. The glow of success surrounded her, but she carried it lightly, as though she had worn it for years. She signed a few autographs, took photos with attendees, exchanged polite words with journalists. Each smile, each handshake, felt like closure, gentle and earned. The same voice that once trembled in fear now guided conversations with quiet authority. But then, through the shifting crowd, she saw a figure standing just beyond the velvet rope near the lobby bar, hesitant, out of place, Ethan. For a moment she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. But no, it was him. His hair a little thinner, his shoulders less sure. The confident gleam that once dominated every room was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar. Restraint. He waited as her admirers thinned out. When she finally turned toward the elevator, he took a few careful steps forward. "Amara," he said softly. His voice, once laced with arrogance, was unsteady now. She turned. "Ethan." For a moment, they just stood there, two people bound by a memory neither could erase. The air between them hummed with years of unspoken truths. "I just wanted to say," he hesitated, words fumbling like loose change in his hand. "I saw your speech, it was incredible," she nodded. "Thank you." He shifted awkwardly. "You always had it in you, you know. I guess we just didn't see it." She tilted her head slightly, a small smile forming, not out of triumph, but out of understanding. "No," she said gently, "you did see it. That's why you tried to break it." He froze. No defense, no smirk, no laughter. Just silence. For a second, the hotel lobby around them faded. No chandeliers, no music. Just two echoes of their past selves facing each other in a moment that felt almost sacred. She stepped closer, her tone soft, her gaze steady. "You gave me something I didn't have before, Ethan. A reason to believe that even pain can teach grace." He blinked, unsure how to respond. The line between apology and regret blurred in his eyes. "I didn't mean to—" "I know," she interrupted, not unkindly, "but meaning doesn't erase impact." He looked down, shame flickering across his face like shadow under candlelight. She exhaled, slow, measured, peaceful. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out a small card, and handed it to him. "My foundation hosts workshops for young professionals," she said. "We teach leadership through empathy. You'd be surprised how much strength comes from listening." He took the card, hesitant, almost reverent. "You're inviting me?" "I'm inviting you to evolve," she replied. Her smile lingered, warm, composed, unshaken. Then she turned slightly, signaling the end of the conversation. "Amara," he called again, voice soft. "I'm proud of you." She paused mid-step, but didn't turn around. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You should be." The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside, the soft golden light wrapping around her like closure. Ethan stood where she'd left him, a man surrounded by his own echoes. As the doors slid shut, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. Calm eyes, unhurried breath, quiet power. The woman who once practiced speeches alone in her apartment now spoke to the world, and even those who tried to silence her listened. Outside, rain began to fall against the glass walls of the hotel, soft, steady, cleansing, hit-like, she might have whispered if it were a film. "If you believe calm women are the most dangerous." And somewhere in that quiet lobby, between regret and grace, the sound of her heels faded, elegant, final, unforgettable. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the 17th floor, the same familiar sound that once made her chest tighten years ago. The doors opened with a gentle sigh, revealing a hallway she hadn't walked in what felt like a lifetime. The company logo still gleamed on the frosted glass walls, polished and proud, but something in the air had changed. Where laughter used to echo like knives, there was now only the quiet hum of keyboards and the murmur of collaboration. Amara stepped out, heels clicking against the marble, the rhythm steady, self-assured. She carried a slim leather folder and a calm smile, escorted by an HR manager who spoke with reverence. "Everyone's been so excited to meet you. It's such an honor having you here, Ms. Das." She nodded, polite but distant. She wasn't here for nostalgia. She was here for purpose. The conference room, once the scene of her humiliation, was now filled to capacity. Young employees lined the walls, notebooks in hand, eyes wide with anticipation. A banner stretched across the front. Guest speaker series, The Power of Voice, with Amara Das. She took a moment before walking to the podium. Her fingers brushed the edge of the same wooden table where Ethan had once mocked her pronunciation in front of the team. She remembered the sting, the forced laughter, the invisible shrinking of her spirit. Now she stood taller than the memory. As the lights dimmed slightly, she began. Her voice filled the room, low, confident, melodic. "There was a time," she said softly, "when I thought silence was survival." The audience leaned forward, hooked from the first line. When I spoke, people heard difference and mistook it for weakness. I tried to erase it, to fit in, to sound like everyone else. But in doing so, I almost lost myself. She glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of a few younger employees. Some nodded, some simply watched, caught between admiration and awe. "Your voice," she continued, "isn't something to be corrected. It's something to be cultivated. It carries the map of your journey, your roots, your courage, your identity." Her accent wrapped around the words, deliberate and graceful. It was the same voice that once drew mockery, now commanding respect. A few rows from the back, someone discreetly wiped away a tear. Another scribbled down her quote, underlining it twice. She continued, shifting from story to strength. "When they tell you to soften who you are, remember this. Comfort is often the enemy of growth. Speak clearly, speak proudly, and if your voice shakes..." She paused, smiling. "Let it shake the room." Applause burst from the audience, genuine, emotional, sustained. She waited, allowing the sound to breathe, her expression soft and composed. When the applause quieted, a young woman from the marketing team hesitated before raising her hand. "Miss Das?" she said, voice trembling slightly. I have an accent, too." Amara smiled, her eyes lighting with recognition, as though she'd been waiting for that moment. She stepped closer to the edge of the stage, meeting the young woman's gaze directly. "Then," she said warmly, "you have music the world needs to hear." The girl's shoulders relaxed. A few others smiled, nodding, as if something heavy in the room had just lifted. Amara let the moment linger, then closed with quiet conviction. "Never underestimate the sound of your own voice," she said. "It may start as a whisper, but one day, it might echo across the world." The room erupted again, applause so loud it seemed to vibrate through the glass walls. For a moment, Amara looked out at the audience, young professionals, dreamers, and immigrants who saw pieces of themselves in her story. The laughter that once belittled her had transformed into the applause that celebrated her. She took one last look around the room, the same space that once held her, humiliation, and found peace in the symmetry. Near the back, a framed photograph caught her eye, a new company value statement printed below it. "Respect every voice." Her smile deepened. Perhaps she had changed more than just her story. She had changed theirs. As she gathered her folder and prepared to leave, the HR manager whispered, "That was extraordinary. You've inspired them all." Amara turned toward the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The sunlight hit the glass just as it did that first morning years ago. But this time it felt different. It felt earned. "I didn't come here to inspire," she said quietly. "I came to remember." And with that, she walked down the hall, calm, unhurried, each step a testament to the distance between who she was and who she had become. At the elevator, she paused briefly, her reflection caught in the mirrored doors. For a heartbeat, she saw both versions of herself, the timid girl with a trembling voice and the woman who made the world listen. As the doors slid open, she whispered, "To no one and to everyone." He mocked my accent. Now the world echoes it back in applause. The doors closed softly behind her, leaving only the quiet hum of admiration in her wake. Her revenge was complete, not in silence, but in legacy. The night had folded itself gently over the city, a velvet sky stitched with gold. From her penthouse balcony, the world stretched wide and glimmering below, every window a heartbeat, every light a memory. The skyline of Manhattan shimmered like applause. Endless, dazzling, alive. Amara stood barefoot on the cold marble tiles, a soft shawl draped over her shoulders. The hum of distant traffic rose and fell like ocean waves, but up here the air was still, almost sacred. Inside, the glow from her living room spilled through glass doors, a quiet contrast to the chaos of her schedule. On the coffee table, her phone buzzed repeatedly. Notifications, emails, invitations. TED Global Summit. Invitation to keynote. UN Human Rights Forum. Confirmed. Documentary request. The woman who spoke for the world. She glanced at the screen, then smiled faintly and turned the phone face down. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to answer. She poured herself a cup of jasmine tea, the steam curling into the cool night air like whispered gratitude. The city lights shimmered against her reflection in the glass, older now, wiser, yet untouched by bitterness. The woman staring back wasn't the product of revenge. She was the result of resilience. She leaned on the balcony railing, the metal cool beneath her palms. The wind brushed her hair across her cheek, gentle, approving, as if the city itself bowed in acknowledgement. Somewhere below, a saxophone played on a street corner, a slow, soulful tune that carried upward like memory. Each note reminded her of a different time, the laughter in the office, the long nights of practice, the tremor in her first speech, the quiet after every applause. All those echoes, once painful, now formed the music of her life. She took a slow sip of tea and closed her eyes, whispering into the night. He mocked my accent, but it taught me how to be heard. The words drifted softly into the air, vanishing into the hum of the city. Not bitter, not proud, just true. She didn't need to say his name. She didn't need anyone to remember the cruelty or the laughter that once defined her. The world had already rewritten that story for her, in applause, in respect, in every microphone handed to her with trembling admiration. The camera, if this were a film, would pan outward now, slowly, revealing the vastness of the skyline, the contrast between her stillness and the restless world below. Her silhouette against the city lights would say everything words couldn't. Inside, her phone buzzed again, a message from her assistant. "Congratulations on the standing ovation in Geneva, trending worldwide." She smiled. Not the smile of victory, but of peace. She turned back toward the city, eyes reflecting its lights. For a fleeting second, she thought of the girl she used to be, sitting in that tiny apartment, practicing words into the mirror, trembling under the weight of other people's laughter. That girl hadn't vanished. She had evolved, every accent, every stumble, every tear had carried her here, to a life built not on approval, but on authenticity. The city wind whispered through the balcony, lifting the edge of her shawl. The skyline glittered brighter, as if responding to her quiet triumph. She looked out one last time before retreating inside, whispering the words that would never leave her story, but no longer haunted it. They tried to make me smaller, and I became infinite. As she stepped inside, the lights dimmed softly behind her. The city remained, vast, luminous, eternal, her audience and her echo. The camera would linger just long enough to see her set the tea down, turn off the last light, and disappear into her home, peaceful, complete. And as the screen faded to black, her final line would hover like a ghost of poetry across the silence. She never mentioned his name again. But every standing ovation whispered it for her.